The train screeched and groaned as it pulled into the siding, its metal wheels sending echoes through the pale morning fog. Inside the car, mothers clutched their children a little tighter, as though a sudden lurch might snatch them away. The war had stripped them of certainty, of husbands, of homes reduced to rubble by bombs that fell night after night. They had been told, by leaflets, by whisper, by the loud, confident voice of the Reich, that America was a land of cold hearts and iron fences, a place that would grind the enemy into nothing. They expected to step off into hostility. Yet as the train doors creaked open, what met them was not shouting soldiers but an unfamiliar scent, bacon sizzling somewhere close, sweet bread rising in unseen ovens. It drifted on the morning air like something from a dream. One woman, Anna Vogel, 32 and bone-tired, squeezed the hand of her 8-year-old son, Lucas. His shoes were too small. His eyes were too big. He stared out past her skirt at the wooden barracks and the watchtower beyond. It was a camp, yes, fence and guard posts proved that, but it wasn't the nightmare they had pictured. There were pine trees swaying gently, not scorched earth. Smoke curled upward, not from ruins but from chimneys that smelled of breakfast. Lucas whispered something she could barely hear. "It smells like Oma's kitchen." Anna nearly shushed him, afraid to draw attention, but the truth caught in her throat. It did smell like home, in a way she hadn't known she missed. The group shuffled forward under the watch of American guards, young men with sunburned cheeks and rifles slung easy on their shoulders. Their faces were unreadable, but not cruel. Some looked curious. One soldier, barely older than Anna's younger brother, caught sight of a toddler tugging at his mother's coat and, almost shyly, tipped his cap. The mother looked away fast, unsure whether kindness was safe to acknowledge. Rumors from Germany had been sharp-edged. Americans starved prisoners, worked them to death, mocked their suffering. Yet the platform was orderly, quiet except for the crunch of boots on gravel and the occasional cry of a child who had traveled too far. The journey itself had been an odyssey. From bombed-out villages in the Rhineland to crowded trains heading west, then across the Atlantic in holds of gray-painted ships, seasick and silent. Some women still carried the smell of salt on their coats. Anna had watched Lucas sleep curled against her knees, clutching a ragged toy soldier missing an arm. She had wondered whether she was making a mistake by surviving, whether surrendering meant betraying her husband, Hans, still missing somewhere on the Eastern Front. She had wondered what awaited them in a land they'd been taught to fear. Now, stepping onto American soil for the first time, she found herself unprepared for gentleness. The guards guided them toward trucks waiting to carry them deeper into the camp. Children craned their necks to see beyond the fences. Flat fields, barns, windmills spinning lazily. Somewhere, a dog barked. Somewhere else, a bell rang, calling men to breakfast. The clang startled the group. Some women flinched. But then came another sound, startling in its normalcy, the clatter of dishes, the low hum of voices, and the unmistakable crackle of meat on a griddle. The smell of bacon thickened in the cool air, joined now by something sweet, apples baking, maybe, or pie crust browning. Hunger, dulled by days of rations, sharpened suddenly in every stomach. Lucas looked up. "Mama, they're cooking?" His voice was thin, unsure if he was allowed to hope. Anna didn't know what to say. The truth was she didn't know what kind of place this was. The fences were real. The guards carried guns. But this was no dungeon. This was not the revenge promised by Goebbels' broadcasts. They were led to a registration hall, a simple wooden building, smelling faintly of soap and ink. Each family gave names, ages, places of origin. The Americans worked quickly, some speaking halting German, others relying on translators. Fingerprints were taken. Papers stamped. The process was brisk but not brutal. An officer handed Anna a card with her name neatly typed and a barracks assignment. She had imagined snarling men and slammed doors. Instead, she was handed a blanket and told, in accented German, "Your boy can eat soon." Inside the barracks, rows of bunks lined the walls, each with a thin mattress and folded sheets. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floor. A little girl darted past Lucas, laughing for the first time in what felt like months. Her mother scolded her softly but did not look afraid. Anna sat on the bunk edge and exhaled a breath she didn't realize she had been holding since they boarded the ship. It wasn't home, but it wasn't hell. Then the mess bell rang again. The families were guided to the dining hall, a long, echoing room filled with the aroma that had haunted their arrival. Anna held Lucas's hand as they entered. Steam rose from trays of food, scrambled eggs, porridge, and yes, thick-cut bacon glistening with fat. At the end of the line, a soldier in a white apron sliced wedges of apple pie, the crust golden and sugared. The mothers moved hesitantly, unsure if this abundance was a trick. A few whispered prayers. Some refused the meat, half fearing it was poisoned. But the children were quicker to trust. Hunger makes its own decisions. Anna watched Lucas bite into his first piece of bacon. His face was a revelation. Surprise, delight, then the smallest guilty smile, as though eating well might dishonor the father he barely remembered. Anna touched his hair. She felt something twist inside her, a strange mix of relief and shame, of safety and dislocation. She was still a prisoner. She was still the enemy. Yet here was food she hadn't smelled in years, and warmth, and even, dare she name it, kindness. Around them, the room hummed with low voices. A few women began to talk softly, to compare journeys, to wonder aloud if this camp was a temporary stop or the shape of their future. The guards watched but did not intrude. Outside, autumn leaves skittered across the yard. The sky was the soft blue of a world that didn't know their names. Anna's heart beat hard. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She only knew this. The story she had been told about America was already breaking apart. Fear was giving way to something more complicated, more dangerous than hatred. Hope, thin, hesitant, but alive, was creeping in, carried on the scent of bacon and pie. And though she couldn't have known it then, that quiet shift would become its own kind of battle, one the Reich had never prepared her to fight. Morning light slipped through the cracks in the barracks, thin and golden, catching on the rough wood beams above the bunks. Anna woke first, as she always did now, listening for the small breaths of her son. Lucas slept curled on his side, one hand resting on the ragged toy soldier he had carried across the ocean. She touched his shoulder gently and marveled. He had not cried in his sleep for 2 nights in a row. Perhaps that meant something. Perhaps survival was taking root. Life inside the wire was nothing like the warnings. It was not freedom, but neither was it the cruelty they had braced for. Days began with the clang of the mess bell and the smell of coffee, thin but hot, drifting across the yard. Women shuffled from their barracks to the dining hall, coats buttoned against the morning chill. Children trailing behind. Guards watched from the towers, rifles slung casually, more bored than menacing. Anna had noticed how young they were. Some seemed barely older than the boys Germany had sent to the front in its final desperate months. They did not sneer or spit. Most did not even stare. Breakfast came on metal trays, porridge sweetened with sugar, bacon crisp and curling, bread still warm from the ovens. To Anna's surprise, the food rarely tasted of resentment. It was simple, hearty, almost respectful. The first days she had eaten sparingly, afraid abundance would vanish if she trusted it. But hunger wore down suspicion, and soon she ate beside Lucas without shame. The boy was changing fastest. His cheeks filled. His eyes no longer darted at every sudden sound. He laughed sometimes now, though he covered his mouth afterward, as if remembering he was supposed to be afraid. Around them, a small society took shape. Mothers hung laundry on lines strung between barracks. Children chased one another through the dusty yard, inventing games with sticks and scraps. The Americans allowed gardening. Neat rows of cabbages sprouted by the fence. A library opened, its shelves lined with donated books, some in German, some in English. Anna would stand in the doorway, scanning spines she could not yet read, and wonder what new world hid inside those pages. Not everyone welcomed the quiet humanity. There were whispers among the women. This kindness was a trick, an attempt to make them forget who they were. One night, under the muted light of the barracks lantern, a woman named Gerda hissed that accepting gifts from the enemy was betrayal. "Do not let your son grow soft," she warned Anna. "They want to change him." Anna said nothing, but the words stuck like burrs. Was it wrong to let Lucas play, to let him smile? Was surviving here a kind of surrender? The Americans seemed to understand this silent battle. They were neither overly friendly nor openly hostile. Guards nodded politely but kept distance. Once, When Lucas fell and scraped his knee, a soldier jogged over with a clean cloth and iodine. He didn't speak German. He simply knelt and cleaned the wound with quiet care, then ruffled Lucas's hair and walked away. Anna had wanted to thank him but couldn't find the English words. That night she lay awake, wrestling with gratitude and guilt. Sunday brought an unexpected surprise, a small wooden chapel built near the edge of the camp. It was plain but warm, sunlight pooling on rough benches. The Americans permitted services in German. Anna sang hymns she had learned as a girl, the familiar notes trembling on her lips. For a moment, it felt like reclaiming a piece of herself the war had tried to erase. Lucas fidgeted beside her, but his eyes were wide, curious. Faith had been battered by years of propaganda and fear, but here it flickered back to life. Letters arrived too, though censored. Anna received one from her sister still in Cologne, describing bombed streets and hunger. She wrote back about safety but not comfort, careful not to sound unpatriotic. Yet her pen betrayed small truths. Lucas was healthy. They were fed. The guards were not cruel. Each word felt dangerous and yet necessary, as if honesty could plant seeds across an ocean. The locals outside the fence did not always share the Americans' restraint. Sometimes when the women were marched to do laundry at a nearby facility, farmers stared with open anger. Supplies were scarce. Their sons had died in Europe. Why feed the enemy's families? One afternoon, a truck passed and a man spat toward the column. The glob landed near Anna's feet. She flinched but kept walking, head high. That night she told Lucas nothing. Some hatreds were best left unnamed. Over time, routines dulled the strangeness of captivity. Children studied English with volunteer teachers. Women learned sewing from one another. Anna discovered she had a gift for mending clothes. Soon she was patching uniforms for guards who slipped coins or chocolate in quiet thanks. She took no joy in serving the enemy, but the work gave her purpose, a way to feel human again. Still, a low unease lingered. What would this slow softening mean when the war ended? Who would they be when they went home? One evening, after lights out, Anna sat awake listening to the wind rattle the barracks walls. Across the aisle, Gerda whispered prayers, fierce and angry. Lucas stirred, muttering in his sleep. Anna thought of Hans, somewhere lost to battlefields or captivity of his own. Would he understand the strange peace she had found here? Would he forgive it? Her heart ached with the question. Then, one crisp afternoon, the camp's routine trembled. A group of American officers arrived in jeeps, inspecting the grounds with serious faces. Rumors flew. New orders, maybe relocation, maybe men would be separated from families again. Anna watched from the laundry line, soap stinging her hands, as one officer paused near the chapel and spoke quietly with the commandant. The guard's casual air tightened into something formal. Even the children sensed it. Their games stilled, their laughter faded. That night, word filtered through the barracks like a gust of cold air. The camp was not just a shelter. It was part of a larger plan. The Americans were teaching, observing, reshaping. They wanted these families to see a different America than the one propaganda had painted. They wanted minds to change, loyalties to shift. The bacon, the books, the gardens, all of it might be more than kindness. Anna lay awake long after Lucas slept, heart thudding. She had feared cruelty. Now she feared something subtler. If kindness could be a weapon, what did that mean for the enemy, and for her own heart already beginning to change? Snow fell in soft, soundless flakes, settling on the barbed wire until the fence seemed less like a prison and more like a lace curtain draped against the winter sky. Anna stood by the small garden she and other women had coaxed from the stubborn soil before the frost came. Dead stalks poked through the thin white crust. Lucas was nearby, throwing snowballs at the barracks wall, laughing in bursts that rose like birds into the cold air. She watched him and felt the now familiar ache, relief that he was safe, unease that safety had come from those once called enemies. By December the camp had become strangely efficient, almost village-like. Yet beneath its quiet rhythms pulsed a plan the prisoners could feel but not name. Books in German arrived in neat stacks, Goethe and Schiller, but also translations of American novels. A small classroom opened where volunteer teachers taught English phrases, arithmetic, even civics. Radio broadcasts played carefully selected news, stripped of Nazi triumphalism but not mocking. Subtle, soft, deliberate. At first Anna thought it mere charity. Then she began to suspect intention. One day a new officer arrived to tour the classrooms, tall, graying, with the calm air of someone accustomed to strategy. He watched the children repeat English words, bread, apple, freedom, and smiled faintly. Lucas beamed back, proud of his quick learning. Afterward, Anna overheard two guards speaking in low tones. This officer was part of the psychological warfare division. The phrase made her shiver. Warfare, but of the mind. The Americans' reasoning slowly revealed itself through conversations half overheard and rumors shared in whispers over washbasins. They believed that war was not only won by weapons but by stories, by reshaping how captives understood the world. Treat prisoners humanely, feed their children, show them books instead of beatings, and the ideology they carried might crack from within. Many of these men and women would return to Germany. Some would rebuild it. If they went home with memories of decency rather than revenge, perhaps the next war could be prevented before it began. Statistics filtered through the camp grapevine. More than 400,000 German POWs were held across America. Some were being offered classes in democracy, engineering, and agriculture. Others wrote letters describing not cruelty but fairness, even opportunity. These letters, censored but potent, slipped past the Reich's collapsing censorship networks and reached families starving in ruins. Each word, "We eat well," "The guards are just," "America is not as we were told," was a quiet detonation against the propaganda machine. Anna found herself both grateful and unsettled. She thought of Hans, who had believed fervently in the fatherland's call, who might still be alive somewhere. Would he consider her weak for accepting comfort from the enemy? Yet when Lucas ran to her after class, proudly reciting an English sentence, "I am safe here," her eyes filled with tears she could not stop. Safety. What mother would reject it? But safety given as strategy felt like a trap she could not escape without hurting her son. Gerda remained defiant. "They fatten us with kindness," she said one night, voice sharp as broken glass. "They want to erase what we are." Anna wanted to argue, but the words failed. Because wasn't it true? She was already changing. She no longer dreamed of vengeance. She no longer believed everything she had been told. The edges of hatred were dulling, replaced by questions she had no tools to answer. The Americans were not unaware of their own controversy. Some guards muttered about resources wasted on Nazis. Local newspapers carried editorials demanding harsher treatment. Yet the policy held. Higher command argued that breaking the Nazi spirit required something more subtle than punishment. Defeat had to reach the heart. To show a better way of life was to plant a rival vision inside minds trained to obey tyranny. Christmas brought a moment that crystallized this shift. The chapel glowed with lantern light as prisoners gathered, voices trembling through "Still Nacht." When the hymn ended, an American chaplain stepped forward and, haltingly but with genuine effort, wished them peace in German. Then he presented gifts, simple toys for the children, warm socks for the women. The guards joined in handing them out. Lucas tore the paper from a small carved horse and clutched it like treasure. Anna watched the chaplain's face and felt something break inside her, a belief she hadn't known she still held, that enemies must always hate. After the service, she stepped outside into the cold. Snow whispered under her shoes. She thought of Cologne's ruins, of propaganda posters now tattered and meaningless. If the Reich had won hearts with fear, the Americans seemed to be winning with something harder to resist. Not love, exactly, but humanity. And humanity could be dangerous. Letters sent home grew bolder. Some women described learning English, others told of plentiful food and decent guards. Anna wrote to her sister again, this time daring to say, "It is not what we feared." She imagined the letter slipping through a broken postal system, reaching bombed-out Cologne, planting doubt in hearts once filled with certainty. Yet kindness carried its own moral weight. Anna wrestled with guilt. Was she betraying those who had died believing in Germany? Could she honor Hans's memory while accepting gifts from his enemy? Or was survival itself the only loyalty that mattered now? She did not know. But she knew Lucas was healthier, laughing, dreaming again. If that was manipulation, she would take it. And yet the thought stung. The camp's tone subtly shifted as the Allies advanced in Europe and the Reich began to crumble. News bulletins reported German retreats, cities falling. Guards no longer hid their smiles when radios crackled with surrender announcements. For the prisoners, relief mingled with humiliation. Some men wept quietly. Some women stared at the horizon, numb. Anna felt only exhaustion and an odd flicker of hope she barely trusted. One bitter evening, as the wind rattled the barracks, a guard delivered a notice. A visiting officer would soon address the camp. Rumor said he was from Washington, a man overseeing the re-education program. The word hung heavy in the air. Re-education. Anna tasted its strangeness. They were not just prisoners of war, they were subjects in an experiment. That night she lay awake listening to Lucas breathe. She thought of the first morning's bacon and pie, of the gardens and classrooms and quiet chapel gifts. Each act of kindness had felt small, almost ordinary. Now she saw them strung together like beads on a wire, deliberate, gleaming, sharp in their subtlety. The war outside might be ending, but another war was being fought here, within walls draped in snow and mercy. A war for hearts and minds. And without meaning to, Anna realized, she and her son were already on the front lines. The war ended quietly inside the camp, with no trumpets, only the slow unraveling of fear. One morning the radio spoke of Germany's surrender, and the air seemed to change, lighter but strange. Women gathered in clusters, some weeping, some staring into nothing. Children sensed the shift and fell silent, unsure what victory or defeat meant to people who had already lost so much. Anna stood among them, Lucas pressed against her side, feeling as if the ground beneath their feet had moved. Soon after, the fences began to matter less. Guards smiled more easily. Rules loosened. There were meetings about repatriation, a word that sounded both hopeful and terrifying. Going home meant stepping into ruins. It also meant leaving the fragile safety they had built here. Anna felt the weight of it with every new rumor. Trains would come, ships would follow, families would return to a Germany unrecognizable and broken. Lucas ran with other boys across the yard, his laughter easy now, his German accent laced with stray English words. He was taller, stronger, less haunted. When Anna watched him, she felt fierce gratitude and a quiet dread. What had these months done to him? To her? Would Hans, if alive, know his son, or understand the boy's fondness for American songs hummed under his breath? One afternoon, an American officer assembled the camp in the yard. Snow had melted, mud clung to boots. The man spoke in measured German, thanking the families for their resilience, promising transport home soon. But his words carried more than logistics. He spoke of peace, of rebuilding a Germany that rejected tyranny. He said, gently but firmly, that what they had seen here could be a beginning. Take home the truth, he said. That strength does not require cruelty. That dignity can survive even in defeat. Some women turned away, unwilling or unable to accept. Others, including Anna, listened in stillness, recognizing the quiet challenge inside the farewell. Preparations for departure stripped life down to essentials. The gardens were abandoned, books packed away. Children clutched the small toys they had been given, talismans of a strange kindness. Anna folded blankets and mended clothes, her fingers working on autopilot while her mind wandered to the ruins of Cologne, to her sister's last letter describing streets without roofs. She feared that returning would feel like waking from a dream, stepping back into hunger and suspicion. Yet she also feared staying too long inside the dream's gentleness. The final morning came with a pale sky and restless birds. Families gathered by the gate, their belongings bundled in crates and worn suitcases. Guards helped lift bags onto trucks. No one spoke much. Anna held Lucas's hand, feeling its warmth and strength. She remembered the terrified child who had arrived clutching a broken toy soldier. Now he stood straight, face solemn but calm. He waved shyly to one of the guards who had taught him to throw a baseball. The man raised his hand in return, eyes soft with something like pride. As the trucks pulled away, the camp receded, a blur of barracks, wire, and watchtowers softened by distance. Anna kept looking back until it was gone. She had expected relief. Instead she felt a complicated ache. This place, born of war and captivity, had sheltered them, fed them, even taught them to trust in small ways again. Leaving felt like tearing a bandage from a wound not fully healed. The ship home was crowded and cold, but safer than their crossing months before. Women spoke quietly, sharing hopes and fears. Some dreamed aloud of rebuilding, of husbands returning, of children growing into a better Germany. Others stayed silent, eyes fixed on the gray horizon. Anna spent the journey watching Lucas read an English book a guard had slipped into his bag. She wondered if knowledge could survive ruins, if compassion could survive anger. When Cologne finally appeared, its skyline shattered, its streets a web of rubble, Anna almost turned away. Smoke still curled from broken chimneys. People moved like shadows among the ruins. Yet as she stepped onto the dock with Lucas, she felt a strange, steadying resolve. They were alive. They had seen another way to live, one built not on terror but on fairness. Perhaps that memory could be a seed, small but stubborn. In the years that followed, many former prisoners wrote of the camps, not as paradise, but as proof that enemies could be human. Some became teachers, mayors, engineers. Some quietly raised children who believed in democracy instead of dictatorship. Anna would become one of them. She never forgot the hunger of the war years, nor the humiliation of defeat, but she also never forgot the first scent of bacon and pie drifting through fear, or the chapel glowing with unexpected warmth on Christmas night. Those moments lived inside her like coals that refused to die. For Lucas, the memory was even stronger. As a man he would speak of that camp when others spoke only of ruin. He would tell his children that kindness had reached him before hatred could harden completely. He would say it saved him. Anna, listening years later, would smile quietly, proud and uneasy all at once. She had feared America's gentle strategy even as she accepted its shelter. Now she understood its power. Wars could be lost with guns, but souls could be won with humanity. As their train rattled deeper into a broken homeland, Anna glanced at her son and felt a new certainty. History was shifting, not only through treaties and battles, but through the quiet, dangerous strength of mercy.